Good Wednesday afternoon. Thanks for joining us on KARE 11 News Now. I'm Sammy Solina. New today, a big win for abortion advocates in Wisconsin. The state Supreme Court striking down a state abortion ban law that dated back to 1849. At the time, Wisconsin enacted legislation that said someone who intentionally killed a woman's unborn child could face a $10,000 fine and 6 years in prison. One exception was allowed to save the life of the pregnant woman. Doctors in Wisconsin says this ruling clears up any confusion about what's legal and what's not.
I recall caring for a patient with a life-threatening pregnancy complication who needed abortion care during this time. I looked around the operating room at the nurses, the anesthesia team, and feared for the patient's safety, but also my own. Was this life-threatening condition life-threatening enough? I also recall a moment on labor and delivery with a trainee who said, "We aren't really going to know where the line is until one of us goes to jail."
A spotlight fell back on Wisconsin's law in 2022 after the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, ending the constitutional right to terminate a pregnancy. Some state prosecutors said they wanted to enforce the law. Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers sued to stop it from being used. A few extra set of eyes will be on the ground and in the water this weekend around Hennepin County. Today, safety leaders sharing their plan to make sure everyone has a fun and safe 4th of July weekend. The last few years in Minneapolis, chaos has erupted across the city, leaving several people hurt and dozens of arrests. Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara says oftentimes it's a small group of people, many times youth, that are coming in and pushing things out of hand. But they have been coordinating with park police to keep the parks calm.
So the question continues to be, how are we gauging the effectiveness of these closures? I've told Chief Ohado privately, thank you so much. The first summer I was here, the initial chaos that we had was all around Bde-Makaska. And you could go ask residents that live 5, 10, even maybe 15 blocks away from the park, the chaos that they went through that night, because people were parking in the parking lots and then that was spilling out into the neighborhoods all around there. We didn't have anything near that level down there last year, and that's because of the plan that Chief Ohado put into effect. So very, very clearly that produced results, and we are thankful, as our residents are, we are thankful for it.
Minneapolis 911 says they have extra people on staff for the weekend, and if you're hurt or in danger, please give them a call. But if you're calling about a noise complaint, dial 311 instead, so 911 lines can stay open for emergencies. Also, Hennepin County Sheriff says they will have extra patrols out on the water looking for people who are boating while intoxicated. New today, a mixed verdict in the Sean Diddy Combs trial that will likely put the music mogul in prison for just a few years. A jury acquitting him of the most serious charges of racketeering and 2 counts of sex trafficking by force. They found him guilty on 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. This is a stunning legal victory for Combs' legal team. It is a massive blow to New York prosecutors, who had this trial over the last 7 weeks and brought 34 witnesses, including one of Combs' former girlfriends, Cassie Ventura. Her attorney says while Combs is being held responsible for the abuse he put her through, she's not a winner.
She endured 10 years of abuse, where she had to engage in days-long sexual acts with UTIs. She alleged that she was raped, and so to call her a winner, even though she did get $30 million, part from, as she testified, part from Sean Combs, part from the hotel. No amount of money is going to ever undo what she had to endure.
Also in court today, the man accused of murdering 4 Idaho College students inside their off-campus apartment, Brian Kohberger, accepting a plea deal to avoid being put to death. Jay Gray is in Boise with details.
The murder of Madison Mogen. How do you plead guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
Brian Kohberger staring blankly at the judge, admitting for the first time he viciously stabbed to death 4 University of Idaho students.
First-degree murder of Ethan Chapin, a human being. How do you plead guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
Video streamed from inside the courtroom doesn't show the sobbing friends and family of the victims.
He did that with the intent to kill.
But those cameras did capture the emotion of Prosecutor Bill Thompson when sharing details of the case for the judge to consider during sentencing, mentions their names.
He then killed intentionally, willfully, deliberately, with premeditation, and with malice forethought, Maddie Mogen, Kaylee Gonzalez, Ethan Chapin, and Santa Cruz.
Kaylee Gonzalez's father was not in the courthouse, outraged at the plea deal and what he says was the lack of input from victims' families during the process.
We didn't agree on any of it. He only negotiated with the murderer of our children. That was the only person that he negotiated with. He didn't give us the common courtesy to negotiate with us.
More than 2.5 years after the murders, the pain's still overwhelming. The off-campus apartment where the attacks took place is gone. Plaques and balloons, a small memorial where it once stood. It's summer break for the University of Idaho, but for many, there is no break from the fear and loss after what happened here.
Never really locked my doors at night before, and I have ever since. Well, I think the town is healing, but I don't think it'll ever be the same.
Jay Gray, NBC News, Boise, Idaho.
Developing in Brooklyn Park, police are looking for whoever shot and killed a 17-year-old girl. Police say just before 8 o'clock last night, they were called about a shooting near 70th and Lakeland. Arriving officers found the girl and tried to save her life, but she was rushed to the hospital where she died. Authorities say several officers and a state patrol helicopter were called in to look for whoever shot her, but they didn't find anyone. A look from our nation's capital today, where the U.S. House of Representatives could hold a procedural vote on President Trump's so-called Big Beautiful Bill. It narrowly passed the Senate and needs to get through the House with no changes in order to get to the president's desk. House Speaker Mike Johnson says he wants to hold a final vote on it by tomorrow so the president can sign it in by Independence Day on Friday. But most Republicans praise it for its tax breaks, like extending 2017 cuts, upping the child tax credit, raising some standard deductions, and temporarily easing taxes on tips and overtime. Some, however, are worried about the bill adding trillions to the national deficit. The House needs all but 3 votes to pass the bill. Happening right now, it is one of the busiest times to travel for the 4th of July holiday, and you may want to just avoid driving today altogether because today and Sunday, according to AAA, are expected to be the busiest. AAA says to expect 72 million Americans to travel around the country for Independence Day. The vast majority, about 62 million of those travelers, are driving. AAA and Gas Buddy both share some good news. The price of summer holiday gas hasn't been this cheap since 2021. We just checked, and the state average is about $3.02 for a gallon. More than a dozen new state laws and budget items are officially in effect across Minnesota this week, and among them, a law that creates a dedicated office to help guide and support people living under HOAs. Morgan Wolf spoke with the lawmaker who pushed this change forward and a Minnesotan who says it's just the beginning of the oversight HOAs really need.
More than 1.5 Minnesotans live in a community association. And according to a legislative work group, there are roughly 8,000 HOAs in the state.
We have an entire new board of directors, and I guess I'm in charge of it.
Homeowner Gretchen Winke had a dispute with her HOA last year.
It came down to just being kind of surprised by a rather large assessment for a construction project at the building that once everybody started peeling back layers and looking into it, it's like, hey, wait a minute, asking these questions, trying to figure out what's going on, we're not getting many answers back.
Her experience led to her advocating for more safeguards around homeowner associations. Legislators last year created a work group to get a better idea of what Minnesotans were experiencing. Representative Kristen Bonner was the chair and turned the findings into legislation.
After hearing more and more about the concerns of folks from across the state about their HOA, we really decided that we really had to dive in and do something.
Do you feel that there wasn't really an advocate for homeowners that live within an HOA?
You know, and that is our hope is that the ombudsman can actually serve that role.
The creation of the ombudsperson was bipartisan. That person will be a resource for homeowners having difficulties or questions. Bonner says HOAs don't have much regulation in Minnesota, and that state work group that she chaired came up with 41 recommendations addressing some issues like financial reporting, dispute resolution, and governance. But the bipartisan legislation with those reforms fell short this session. They were strongly opposed by property management companies.
And those are things that we really have to address in Minnesota, and we are long past due for those reforms. So it is something we just have to embrace at this point and make sure that we get it done.
Gretchen hopes that others don't have similar experiences to hers. Her dispute against her association went to the courts. She not only paid her attorney fees, but she says she also covered her HOAs following their bylaws.
The way that the laws are currently designed, it's not to the benefit of the homeowner. Definitely more, it's to the benefit of the association and ultimately benefit of the property management companies, because they're the ones that are going to be cashing in on a lot of this stuff, unfortunately.
Gretchen followed the rules and still paid a price. Now she's hoping rules can start working for homeowners too.
The old adage that if you just don't like an HOA, you just don't buy into one, really doesn't apply anymore.
Happening right now, we're waiting for an injury update on acrobatic performer Red Panda. She fell off her unicycle at the start of her halftime performance at the Commissioner's Cup last night in Minneapolis. She was able to walk away with some help, giving the crowd a wave, but was escorted out on a wheelchair. Stick with us. More news and weather is coming up after the break.